Welcome back to the podcast. So, Albert, you have got some new information about the Google certification. So, why don't you fill us in on what's been going on?
New information.
Okay. No, so you're doing the chapter 3.
Yes. Okay. Man, you put me on the spot there for a second. I was like, we didn't talk about this. What? Anyway, I don't know if you're looking for insider stuff, man. I can't divulge Google's secrets here.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even think about that. The fact that you're interning at Google, you know how the sauce is made now.
It's funny though that like the whatever proprietary stuff I know is so mundane. It's like, oh, I can't disclose that. But, all right, good thing you told me, because I would have never known that was organizational secret. But anyway, I hate to dissuade anybody that thinks they're going to get something good out of me, but I don't know anything that's that's real exciting. But interesting.
What's up, Abe? Thanks for tuning in.
I'm the original super fan, but Abe and Raj and a couple others lay claim to the title now that I'm a company man. So yeah. So I just wanted to give the preface to chapter 3. So chapter 3 is prepare data for exploration. And so if you go back to what they spelled out in the first and second course, which is Google's 6 steps for data analysis, and that is I turned it into a word because that's what Marines do. So it's APASA. And we already went through ask last week. That was chapter 2. And then this week is preparing data for exploration. And it's going to lay the foundation with some technical tools in order to transition into next week, which is process, which I just finished. Excellent course. And you're going to get some foundational principles mainly with SQL, with Quick Labs, and a little more with Excel. That's going to enable next week to kind of ramp up those tools. So kind of an overview. It's a little more technical than lesson 2. It's a little longer than lesson 2. Lesson 2, I think, was a 17-hour course estimated. This one clocks in at 22 is what they tell you to take. That's getting into the more technical ones later on that are going to be in like 25, 27 hours to complete. This is still not a heavily technical course. And as such, you see a little bit of the issue identified last week where there's just not a lot of meat on the bone. And so they kind of had to add some sort of ancillary topics in there that are important to cover, but not necessarily part of preparing data. So just kind of be aware of that. I'll hit that as we go through. There's a couple of topics in there that are just good data topics, not part of preparing data per se. And then obviously the meat of the course is from lesson 4 to lesson 7, which is process, analyze, share, and act. And then that 8th lesson obviously is the capstone project. So, but today is chapter 3. We're in the prepare phase. And once again, remind you the 5 things you got to remember. And as you get out what you put in, there are some optional parts of this course, which is something I don't particularly like. If it's optional, then why put it in the course is my question. I mean, realistically, there's no forcing function there, which is part of number 2. Google's going to expect you to know this material, but there's no forcing function. So you're going to get out what you put in. You can skim through quizzes, you can skip projects, you can skip Quick Labs, and you will get a course certificate at the end, and only you will know what you learned out of it. So get out what you put in. There's no forcing function, but if this is your value proposition, this certificate, then you need to learn this material.
Okay, so Abe says nothing's optional.
Yes, mandatory. Everything mandatory, even fun.
It is interesting to me, though, that why did they choose to do that? Because that so dilutes the signal that the certification sends.
I think they tried to kind of tier the information so that second tier, you'll see today, it's networking and becoming a part of the data community, which is near and dear to my heart, and I think probably near and dear to most of our audience's heart, definitely yours.
Right. Well, you're like the spokesperson.
We do not see that as optional. I can tell you for a literal fact that I'm not sitting here today giving these courses and working with you if not for branding and networking and all the good stuff that they get into in the optional part of this lesson. So you can succeed in data without it. I personally would not recommend robbing yourself of a valuable tool.
All right. Well, so we've got someone chiming in. So Murat says 5th course took too long for me, really. All right. So this one, not quite as bad as that. So let's address
the 5th course is analyzed, so it would probably stand to reason that's the most robust part of a data analysis course. Yeah, I don't mean to put too much sarcasm in there, but I have not completed the 5th course yet. I look forward to it, but I would hope that's the toughest one. Hey, Diane, what's up?
All right, yeah. So let's say hi to everybody who's in the chat now. So we got Diane. Hey, how's it going? Eddie B, thanks for tuning in.
I'm guessing that's Edie.
Edie?
Nima, what's up? Nima won a book yesterday at the data. What was it? The Data Creators Awards. We didn't win any awards. I don't know if you're aware. Yeah.
It sounds like a rigged deal to me, if you ask me.
Didn't even make the podium. I was a little disappointed.
Awesome. We got your favorite.
Yeah.
Shruti, thanks for
coming in.
in.
I had a chat with Shruti the other day. She's awesome.
And then, I don't know. Man, I'm so bad at pronouncing names. How do you say this out?
I'm guessing it's Run It.
Run It? You're like, it just rolls off your tongue. I'm like, I think I overthink it. But all right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Let's jump into the screen share.
Yeah. So you're going to start. I always give the caveat that this course is not going to make you a tool expert. This is where you're going to start getting into tools here. Everything else was just kind of getting online and getting into like how to open Excel, how to open a file to start a spreadsheet. This one is where you actually start getting into some work, and then it builds from there in the next course. So obviously we're prepared data for exploration. I will say overall that this one's rated a 4.8, but this is where you see the number of people taking the course and reviewing the course start to drop off precipitously. I will say I don't think this is as good a course as the first two or the 4th one. It's good. It's worth doing. You need it. But yeah, for my money, not quite as good as the rest of them. Beginner level, obviously the whole course is 22 hours. And then you see your weeks here. So it's going to show up 4 at first. You have to click a see more when you first open this window, and there's a 5th week. That 5th week is optional. So week 1 is data types and structures. And one thing I'd like to point out here is they estimate the hours that it's going to take to complete the weeks. You can get a sense for the weight of these weeks just seeing how long it's going to take to complete them. So week 1, 6 hours. That's a chunk. Week 2, 4 hours. Not so much. That's bias, credibility, privacy, ethics, and access. No tools in that week. That is a lot of videos. You can see 13 videos, less readings, less quizzes, and then those activities are a little lighter. It's a bit squishier section. Week 3, databases, where data lives, 7 hours. That's the chunk of the course right there. And if you're going to focus anywhere and really take your time, right there, you're going to start building your tool skills with SQL, with Quick Labs, and with BigQuery.
Right. Can we pause right there and talk about SQL? So SQL is a skill set that I think everyone here probably knows. I don't have SQL skills.
Oh, we know.
But I have the ability to hire people with SQL skills. So that's the trick. But I guess, so databases, what is it saying about databases? Because what I'm realizing is that me not knowing SQL skills really limits the ability, like the jobs that I could take on, which is interesting because that's more, I guess, being a manager and like managing people, you don't have to have the technical skills. I know enough about SQL that, okay, it's a querying language. This is how you pull data out of a database. So what did it say about SQL?
So it goes beyond kind of the defining what SQL is. In here, it gets a lot more into the technical of how databases are set up, how they interact, what are the different kind of keys that relate between the databases. I don't think, it doesn't really get into joins in here. There's kind of a terms dictionary that you'll see in that 3rd week that and some simple SQL commands that they don't really get into the deeper ones. This is kind of just basic select from where, and just kind of defining things and doing basic queries in this course.
Okay.
I will say that, if anyone else is in the same boat where you're a no-code person, I think that the voices are more or less unanimous that if you're going to start anywhere, you should start with SQL, because that is the most foundational tool that, if you're going to take your skills from Excel and Tableau one notch higher, and you obviously, you can learn Tableau without knowing SQL, without knowing, and any coding languages. I mean, it is a potentially no-code tool. You can use code with it. But if you're looking to go from Excel and Tableau to something where you're seeing a little more into the black box, I think SQL's it.
So I'm going to push back on you a little bit.
Sure.
I have thoughts on this. So I was able to successfully brand myself as a Tableau specialist without knowing SQL. That being said, this is kind of a nuanced point. So if you want to work for one of those big $1 billion plus companies, they function out of databases. So SQL is a prerequisite. But if you're working for that middle to small market, you can get away with not knowing SQL. So for example, like if I'm working for a small mom and pop's retail store, they might be using Square Card Reader, and I can just log onto their Square account, export to CSV or Excel. So I just want to kind of make that point that it's definitely not I don't know. I feel like that's like such a broad sweep of you need to have this. Well, I would say that I guess a more nuanced way of approaching this would be if you don't have it, it's going to limit your options.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, if you're going to work for a big corporation as an entry-level data analyst, you have to be able to meet their requirements for that job.
Right.
If you're going to go straight into consulting, you have to be able to meet what the customer requires of you as an end product. How you get there is on you. If you're providing business value and you can put together a dashboard in Tableau without ever knowing a line of code, the business owner probably doesn't care one way or another. If you're providing value to them and you're delivering what they asked for, that's kind of the magic of consulting and being an independent is nobody's telling you what your job description is. They just tell you what they want as the end product.
Yeah, it's high risk, high reward. But also too, in the previous podcast episodes, we've had Tina Huang, who works at unnamed famed company, and then also Danny Lauer, who is a senior product manager at Amazon. Both of them taught themselves SQL like weeks coming up to their interview. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that is kind of like that high risk, high reward of like, if you really want to light a fire under your ass, line up one of those interviews where you have to know SQL, because then you're going to get grilled and there's going to be a technical component to it.
There's actually a very similar story to that in the fourth lesson with the instructor there. So she had a very Tina Huang-like story where locked herself in a room for a week and learned SQL just drinking from the fire hose.
So I have an update. So I hung out with Molly Monday night, and she was saying that the thing that got her first entry-level data science job, which she didn't even think about, they told her about this after she'd got that job, is that she told them that she learned how to fix her car, how to install her own brakes on YouTube. So I could say it's almost like you could use this as like a judo technique of like, oh yeah, I didn't have the skill set, but I learned it right before this interview, and here are the resources I use. So that signals that you are not only curious and smart and driven, but you can actually learn things pretty quickly. And that's one of the kind of underlying things that you need to have going into this space. But we've got a LinkedIn user who just asked this question. I completed the Google Data Analyst Certification, but the job ads require a related BA degree or years of experience. I'm here to see what to do next. Al, you have any thoughts on that?
I don't want to be too snarky with this, but I mean, there are jobs out there that they will say they require a BA degree, and if you can get yourself into the interview room or you can get an internal referral and you can show them that you have that level of expertise without that piece of paper, you can get that job. There are plenty of stories out there where that's happened. It takes work. It takes networking and personal branding. It takes probably a robust public portfolio. listen to anything that Michael Galarnik's ever said publicly, and you'll get the keys to the castle on that. There are some employers that are just that is a hard and fast requirement, and that's just what they use as a quality screen. If you don't have a BA, you're done. I would say that there are some, just like there's a speed track through the Google Data Cert, there's a speed track through to a bachelor's degree. So, that there are quick and cheap ways to get a 4-year degree. And it can be done in under 4 years, even if you're working full time.
So there's not very much context around this question, but I'm assuming that this person is on LinkedIn, so they probably already have a job. If you are currently working in a company, what you may want to do is try to move into an analytics role laterally within your organization, because I know that's one way to get around the requirements. Because you are a known entity and your current manager can vouch for you to this manager that would be, managing you as an analyst. So that's one potential path past the BA. Now that's a much longer timeline, because I don't know. It's not going to be like, okay, I applied to 5 places and I'm getting interviews next week. It's like, this might be a 6-month to 2 or 3 year plan to kind of make that pivot. But those are my thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, the dean of data will tell you that that bachelor's degree, that is your value signal. If you're going to establish something else as your value signal, it needs to be kind of public and recognized. So yeah, a public portfolio where you say, I can code this, I've done this, I've taken this business problem from unsolvable through these platforms and solved it and done this project and shown value, shown a return on investment. And if you can do that, and if you can relate it to what that business is hiring for, and you can get your face in the door and tell your own story, then that's it. So yeah, networking, branding, public portfolio.
All right, let's get to 2 more viewer submitted questions. So we got one from P. Kartik, and then Abe's got another question. The question specifically for me though. So P. Kartik asks, hey Albert, any tips for someone who is starting the Google Data Analytics course now?
I would just say take your time and trust the process. Hit all of the sections, and learn the material. Yeah, you're not behind. There's thousands of people are starting this cert every day. It's not like it's going to be out of vogue here in a couple of months. I don't hear about anything significant coming up the road behind it that people are anticipating.
Okay, so Abe asks, this one's specifically for me, what roles do you contract out for those with SQL skills? So I've actually kind of come off of pursuing as much consulting work because we're focusing on building out the learning platform. But anytime where I would need someone to write code or at a project, I would just find someone on Upwork. So Abe, I'm not sure if you're currently looking on Upwork, but there are people like me who are looking to subcontract, or you could go directly to the source and find, like a CFO or CEO who doesn't have the tech skills, doesn't have it in-house, and is just looking for someone to execute on a very short-term project. All right, so enough about me and my consulting. Let's get back to this.
Okay. So here we are. This is week 1, which they annoyingly will kind of hide the titles, and sometimes the titles will actually change once you get into the weeks. It's weird. I don't know why they do that. But so we're talking about data types and structures here. And so this is one of the bulkier weeks. This is a 6-hour week. I assure you that I did this practice quiz. The reason why it says undone is because I failed it. I got 67%. So no speed track for me, but I think anybody who's been watching these videos knows how I feel about the speed track. If you're trying to skip sections of this cert, I question why you're doing it in the first place, okay? So just to give you, oh, come on.
We're having some technical difficulties here.
No, I put it on silent. This is Hallie. She is the instructor narrator for this 3rd course. she's good, very expressive, very good in front of the camera. I think she does well with all of the topics. I don't think she's quite as good as the other instructors. Sometimes you can, it seems like you can see her reading a teleprompter. So she's not quite as natural in front of the camera, but she does a good job. So yeah, here in this week 1, so obviously you've got your data exploration is your first day, if you will, first section. It's a lot of the usual boilerplate stuff. There is the meet and greet discussion, which we kind of skipped over in the Google Data Thoughts. I thought this was a bit, I don't know, I just didn't think people would respond to this. What kind of data detective are you? It seemed a bit corny to me. You should definitely go through, when you go through the course, you should definitely write all of the discussion prompts and all of the learning log entries, just because it's going to give you good practice with writing. But I don't intend for Google Data Thoughts to go on for 6 months. So I'm kind of cherry picking some of the topics. And in this one, I felt like I wanted to hear what people were talking about spreadsheets. That was just a more fun topic. So that was the topic we did Monday and Tuesday. And thanks to everybody that participated. That one was actually a lot of fun. Oz du Soleil actually got in there and started kind of throwing a little shade on some people that were, were mentioning some of the more outdated functions in Excel that he no longer uses. Index match was one of them that I mentioned. So yeah, Oz crapped on me a little bit. That's good. I'll take it. So second section is collecting data. If you drop down to the third one, differentiating between data formats and structures, there are 3 readings in here, and these are excellent. So right here, this first one is talking about characteristics of data. So you've got primary data, secondary data, internal, external, continuous, and discrete. This is an awesome kind of ready reference for some of these things. And this is something, honestly, I would print this out and put it in a sheet protector and keep it in a binder, because this is something that I want to be able to look back at from time to time. It's just good foundational knowledge. You get into the second reading, it's about data modeling levels and techniques. This is something that I was not super familiar with. So just really interesting stuff. It's kind of a shortish one, but I don't recommend all of these extra links that they put in here. This one here is fantastic. It's a data modeling techniques article. I was not super familiar with entity relationship diagrams. I know what they are. I've seen them before, but really starts to dig down into what you can use them for. UML class diagrams, again, seeing them, didn't really understand coming into this what their use was or how you would put them together. So this really gets a little bit more into detail about those concepts. And so I like that reading. I recommend every time they give you an extra link, you at least just click it and skim the article or look over the intro paragraph, because a lot of them can be very useful. And then there's a third reading here on the structure of data. Again, short one, but just super good, ready reference on what exactly is structured and unstructured data. That's something that, a concept that can get a little fuzzy from time to time. And then exploring data fields, types, fields, and values. All of this is valuable knowledge. This is a super meaty section right here, but the real heavy hitter you're going to get right here, there's a hands-on with Excel and applying formulas, which is nice because you don't have to go into a quick lab for this one. But then this, a lot of times they'll kind of deke you out. They'll say something is a practice quiz. Really, it's either a writing exercise or what they call a hands-on activity. This one is actually going to get you into Kaggle. It's going to get you to set up a Kaggle account and give you a little, we'll say resume here, and give you some hands-on experience with the tool. Cannot recommend Kaggle enough. Kaggle is a great tool for you to use. That's just going to get you in there and get you started with an account. But Kaggle is something that you can just get into. It's not scary. Getting into GitHub can be a bit scary for a beginner, here to tell you, if you haven't experienced it yourself. Getting into Kaggle is super easy and very user-friendly for a beginner. You can find the beginner exercises very easily. You can do beginner classes very easily. They call them kernels that have a lot of kind of duck or goose jokes in there because their logo is a goose, I think. But Kaggle, I've had nothing but positive experiences with it. It's a great learning platform. I think it's entirely free. Maybe there's a paid version, but I can't recommend enough that you get in there, spend an hour or two playing with Kaggle and just see where it takes you.
So 2 things. I'm wondering if anybody in the chat actually has a link to their Kaggle. So am I understanding this right? Because I actually don't have a Kaggle or a GitHub. I'm mainly just on Tableau Public. Is this a platform where you build out your portfolio?
I don't know if you can do that on Kaggle. That's much more GitHub. You can learn and do challenges on both. Kaggle is much more of a learning-oriented platform. You can learn things on GitHub, but Kaggle just has a ton of learning materials. And they have these big challenges. They have the Grandmaster, they have tournaments and stuff like that. So Kaggle is a big deal. And I'm sure if there are any like real coders in the audience, they're like, yeah, no shit, sure.
All right, we got Okana. How's it going? And then also we got Iris. Thanks for tuning in.
Iris.
Okay, so let's hop back to it.
So that is it for week 1. Ton of really good information in there. Recommend people if you're going to spend some time on this lesson, week 1 and week 3 are the beefier parts of the course. So going into week 2, and you can kind of get the feeling, okay, it's a shorter, it's like a 4-hour week, sorry. And it's on bias, credibility, privacy, ethics, and access. And it's quite a gamut to run in a single week and an estimated 4 hours of work. Okay. So the first day, the first section is going to be on bias. So this whole range of topics, much like about half of what we got into last week with lesson 2, is a very important range of things to talk about. They don't necessarily fit perfectly well together. They don't necessarily fit perfectly well in this course. They're related, but not, this is not preparing data for exploration. I would say that some of this stuff relates more to QA or doing kind of quality checks on your data set before you actually start getting into processing and analyzing. So first section on bias. My other thing on bias is a hot topic, rightly so. It's very important to talk about. I would say that bias is often presented as a data analyst's problem, and I think often that's inappropriate. I think that if you get a data set that is subject to bias, you may or may not be able to figure that out. If you are able to figure that out as an analyst, you may or may not be able to do anything about it other than just kind of hand it back. And I think we perpetuate this, what I think is somewhat mythical, this notion that data analysts or data scientists can fix a biased data set, that you can somehow rejigger the algorithm and kind of reverse engineer and take the bias out of it. Not an expert on such things. It seems to me that the bias is generally imparted by the data collection. The collection method, the sample, the population that you took it from. And once it gets to you, if it's a bad data set, if it's biased, any measures you take to try and fix that bias are probably going to make it worse. They're either going to make it biased in the other direction, they're going to invalidate the data set. And I think that's just, from a logical level, I think that's a very dangerous game to start getting into. If you, as an analyst, find yourself in a situation where you have a biased data set, I think you probably need to do most anything in your power to get rid of it, to figure out what went wrong with it, get rid of it as far as trying to use it to drive business value or value, a return on investment for the organization. You need to be able to expose it. You need to be able to brief properly what's wrong with it. And then you need to propose a course of action going forward that generally, in my estimation, should probably be, we need to go get a better data set and start over.
So I feel like I haven't really had too much experience with bias. It's not something I really think about too much. And I guess I'm privileged in that I work with sales and marketing data. So it's, if you bought the product, I mean, that's the data that we're studying.
Yeah.
I mean, I get into it a little bit with collecting surveys, because I think that, did they touch
I think
on
that's the biggest problem. That's where you're subject to, everything with a survey is, well, who takes the survey? If you're compelling people to take a survey, then your sample is off, because you're getting people that were compelled to do it and are angry they're there. If you can't compel people to take a survey, then you're getting volunteers, which is not a representative sample under most cases. Just everything with survey data is to a certain degree problematic and biased from the get-go.
Right.
I get what Abe's driving at here. What is a biased data set? Yeah, I would say let's kind of back that up and just say you can have a biased sample. You can have an underrepresented or overrepresented population in your sample, that sort of thing. There's nothing biased about data. Now, when you start taking surveys and you ask a survey question that is biased, that happens all the time. That is quite dangerous, and that will lead you to some highly erroneous or not erroneous survey data. People answer the question that's in front of them. If the question is deliberately confusing or skews towards one segment of the population or the other, then your survey results are trash, and you're going to go forward with probably an erroneous conclusion based on the data you collect.
I think the big example is that IQ tests are culturally biased. So if you grew up in another country and moved to the United States, and they're asking things that are regional, like that people regionally know, you're not going to understand the question. That is that's not a reflection of your lower IQ. It's the fact that you're not familiar with the concepts. And there's like the person who grew up in the United States, and they're talking about, okay, well, what's the Southern accent? Or like, I don't know. I could root it down specifically in North Carolina. And like, if they were to ask, oh, bless your heart, is that a good or a bad thing? Someone who is, grew up in Europe might say, oh, that sounds really sweet. But if you're in North Carolina, it's like, oh, you've done something really stupid. Yeah. So like that is an example of a biased question.
Yeah, or in New England, where if they say please with a rise in inflection at the end of their voice, it doesn't mean you screwed up your manners. It means please say again because I didn't hear you.
Right. So it kind of said
questions and surveys.
Yeah.
All of it, and all of this, for my money, is beyond the scope of this course. If you're an analyst, you're generally not taking the surveys. Somebody else is doing that. If this is an entry-level analyst course, you're generally getting data sets and then and doing the mashing yourself. So
right.
While again, this is good contextual stuff. It's good stuff to know about, to understand that it's a problem. It's something that you should look out for in your quality assessment of that data set. But I would say, just like right now, we probably spend a little too much time and energy focusing on this. And you'll see Google being Google, they kind of dropped this into all of the lessons somewhere, the bias and fairness thing. So
I just think this is an interesting topic that doesn't get talked about enough. So that's why I wanted to pull us away from the screen share and get some engagement from the people in the chat. Like, for example, Iris is saying, don't think it's ever possible to remove all biases, but just knowing what kind of biases would exist, plus list them as a limitation assumptions would be good. So I think that I love that Iris, that you brought up this concept of assumptions. So we're actually building out a survey case study course. And what's interesting about that is that you can filter the data to figure out how specific demographics feel, but there's this one KPI that's the end KPI, which is the count of people who are respondents, to where you don't want to base a marketing decision off of 3 people who responded to a specific question about, the quality of the hardware or software of a product, for example. So making those assumptions explicit to your end user, I think, is very important, because if you don't have a big enough sample size, or you're right, if there's a skew or some adverse selection, I don't know if did they touch on adverse selection?
Yeah, they don't. There's not a heavy discussion of what kind of sampling biases occur. They touch on it briefly, but like I said, that can be a whole course, and I'm sure it is, plenty of different places.
Right.
It's something you need to be aware of, but you're not going back to redo the whole survey yourself. What you're doing is identifying it like, hey, this skews heavily towards group A, group B, group C, and passing it back saying, I suggest we go take the time and effort to redo the survey or whatever it was.
Right. I think the overarching point is that to take out of this is that data is not a crystal ball.
Yep.
And it may lead you to the wrong assumption on occasion. And here's the risk associated with that. And
we get into more of that. Like I said, these topics kind of relate to each other fairly well. And they have a loose relation to the data preparation. But next segment is, data credibility. So your interest might be piqued by the title of this one, what is bad data? So they kind of go through the characteristics that you want to find in data, because the cynic in me is just like, what do you mean bad data? Just like Abe said, what is a biased data set? So they give you these characteristics. My caveat to these characteristics, it's reliable, original, comprehensive, current, and cited, keyword ROC. My initial pushback to that is, what data set has all of these 5 characteristics in spades? Where is the perfect data set that is 100% reliable? How does one define reliability? So there's a lot of, and they grant you some of that here. But yeah, I think this definitely relates. It's a judgment call for the analyst. Like, you've got to figure out, hey, this came from some questionable source. Is it reliable? Is it confirmable? Can we, is there a second opinion on this thing? Does it skew with data that we've pulled before historically? And then you're going to get into a quick lab where you're starting to go into public data sets. Throwback to week 1, Kaggle is a great place to find public data sets. So people that are always asking, where do I find projects? Where do I find data? Kaggle and Kaggle are good answers to both of those questions. And I've started giving that answer to people more and more often lately. Interesting topic here on data ethics and privacy. And I actually just had a coffee chat with kind of one of the graybeards at Google, fascinating dude. He was a data scientist at Facebook, probably around the time that data scientist was coined as a term. He was absolutely not, kind of tooting his own horn about that. But when I asked him about that experience and just, hey, what was that like? Talk about being a data scientist at Facebook when Facebook was blowing up and dominating the social media market. And the thing that he keyed on at first was, he said, 10 years ago, if you had told me that we would have whole departments devoted to data privacy and public information privacy and communications, ethical discussions on what we should be doing with that, he's like, you would have been speaking a foreign language to me. He was like, because at that point, not just Facebook, but every kind of data owner out there wasn't even a notion. It was just, people are using our platform. They have this message. We can search these messages. And so he said, so it was never terribly surprising that, that these things kind of blew up, and then the whole public was like, what do you mean you've been looking at our messages? And the response was from Facebook and from all the other organizations was, what do you mean? What do we mean? You're on our platform. So to me, this is a much more interesting topic right now. And to me, this is the under-discussed topic of the ones in this section is the ethics, because it's evolving so rapidly. The public notion of what their right to privacy is on a for-profit business's platform this is a new thing. This is not something that, like the man said, this is not something that was talked about 15 years ago. Medical data, they knew that. Your social security number, got it. That's important to keep private. But when you send a message on Instagram DMs, the notion that is a private thing between you and the message receiver, that is a relatively new concept. It sounds kind of strange, but it is. So to me, this is the ever evolving face of ethics in data is privacy. What belongs to whom and at what point?
Well, did they touch on how there's a network effect with these big tech companies? I don't know. That's kind of a nuanced point.
In this segment, no, I don't. This was a few weeks ago that I did this one, but I don't remember that coming up as a topic.
So essentially,
selling of data between different organizations.
No. So the network effect is that once you hit a critical mass, you naturally develop into a monopoly and the market leader. So, for example, there is no other microblogger platform other than Twitter.
Yeah. Because
any platform that would try to, well, I mean, I guess this is an interesting thing. I don't want to get controversial, but I mean, they took out Parler. Mm-hmm. So there are natural monopolies that form. So you could make the argument that these platforms are more so almost like utilities. But I mean, I don't want to get into a huge ethical debate here.
Oh yeah. The data dictatorship is a real thing, and we talked about this at an interview a few weeks back. But yeah, when Amazon says they have a moral objection to your product and they won't carry it, your product is killed. There's
right.
no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They have cut your ability to sell your products exponentially. So,
okay,
so was the right term, but and then they get into so back to
let's address. We got two viewer submitted questions. So Shibu said, Mark Zuckerberg was Sundar Pichai were both summoned to Congress, which was. Yes. I mean, there's that whole meme that he looks like a reptile with this one.
Yes, but I think the thing that related to my chat with the Google guy was, if you recall, Zuckerberg looked genuinely surprised. I mean, he was somewhat incredulous at some of the questions he was being asked, and that is because sometimes you have to remind yourself that Facebook is a for-profit company, and they offer you a free service, and the only reason it's free is because you accept advertising, and you click all those yes, I agree, and if you actually read those caveats at the beginning when you sign up for a Facebook account, it says we own your information, we can use your photos without your consent, we can access your phone, we can access your computer. And then after the fact, people said, well, wait, why did you read my message? Why are you selling my interests, my data, the things that I've put in private messages to Amazon to do targeted marketing? That's a violation of my rights. To which Facebook says, well, you waived all your rights when you signed up for a Facebook account. It's free. So anyway, a very interesting discussion to have. But yeah.
Okay, so Nikita asked, hey, Albert, earlier you mentioned that we can take business problems from unsolvable through some platforms, solve and add to a portfolio. Can you mention some of these platforms? So I guess she's asking, I guess to unpack this. So yes, Nikita, I think it is important for you to solve novel problems. I think that's kind of what you're getting at with the question. Shashank was on our podcast recently, said, you don't get paid to solve problems that have already been worked out. So you need a novel problem. Al, what were the platforms that you mentioned?
I mean, you name them. You guys know them. It's the ones that the ones that are taught in this course. So Excel, SQL, Tableau, Power BI, R and Python, and the kind of the software that runs those. Whatever the software platforms that we all use that we're studying here. What takes raw numbers from kind of just being listed or even not listed? What takes raw numbers in a collection platform, a sensor, if you will, and transforms them into an analyst putting them in front of a decision maker and saying, we need to drive this business decision. So those platforms that are in that kind of data kill chain, so the sensor sends that data into a database platform, from which you can pull it into a spreadsheet platform if you want to manipulate it freely, or which you can query it with a program running SQL. and then you pull that data into a usable form, and then what? Are you going to show a bank of numbers in spreadsheet form or in database form to a decision maker? No, because then he fires you because you haven't provided any business value. So that bank of numbers that is now in a usable form, or that you've pulled out the useful information from the sort of storm of digits, how do you put that in some sort of form that can drive a proper business decision, a well-informed business decision? It needs to be put into some sort of visualization. Perhaps it needs to be put through an algorithm that can classify, that can cluster it, that can, show a trend, show a prediction. All of the, I was always going to speak up for data engineering, but all of those platforms, most of which we're well familiar with the names, even though we may not be tool experts on the execution. Those are the ones. There's no, I don't advocate any secret program that, I use JMP in my master's program, which I don't necessarily advocate for, but that's the only weird one that I've ever used that people don't really know about. I use the big ones. They work well. There's plenty of literature out there about them. Yeah, no need to deviate too far.
Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes left. Are we going to be able to?
The
highlights. We got enough time. All right, perfect.
I'm an artilleryman, man. I always hit my timeline. Okay, so week 3, and here we've got the bulk of it. So let's geek out a little bit here on week 3. The awesome thing about week 3 is you've got, as annoying as getting in and out of quick labs are, the quick labs are good exercises. They really take you crawl, walk, run. But sometimes it's even kind of too pedestrian a learning curve for me, and I'm sure for plenty of other people out there. If you're in this business, you're probably a pretty smart cookie. So they're going to give you this initial segment of just about databases, what they are, how you use them. And then this quick lab on inspecting a data set is awesome. And this is the reason why this segment is 7 hours long, because you got 3 quick labs. So they usually give you at least an hour to complete a quick lab. Most of them don't take near that long. Love this section on metadata. And I think we referenced this before, just talking about what is metadata, data about data. It's the descriptive data points about a data set, and the, who accessed it, when was it edited, when was it created, by whom, a lot of that stuff. So, when we say, you're fond of saying that's so meta, it's just talking about or doing something about that same subject. So metadata, data about data. It's a fun segment. They really have some fun with it. The one segment video is called Fun with Metadata. So again, it's a bit off the beaten path of this section. Useful information's got to go somewhere, and they put it in here. So this one, talking about accessing different data sources, this is great because I feel like a lot of these kind of tool courses, if you go into SQL, it kind of wishes away the, how do you install Microsoft SQL Server? How do you get data into the program to start playing with it? They sort of just say, okay, go. And some of the learning platforms like DataCamp, where they have kind of their own interface that is not an actual software program, it's organic to them. You can go through a whole lot of learning and then realize at the end, like, shit, I don't know how to download a data set. I don't know how to hit start. I don't even know what program to download. And a lot of these platforms sort of wish that away. I love that they go through that in here step by step with you. Not to name drop, but Mr. Freiberg, our friend, he does a great job with that in his project. He painstakingly explains to you, how to from booting up your computer and double clicking that first icon, how do you get through. Sorting and filtering, awesome. This, if you're workable with Excel, you know how to do this, but it just kind of breaks it down for you. It goes through in Google Sheets, which there's some differences there. It's not just use your Excel skills and go. It's very intuitive, but there's definitely, some of your control shortcuts, your alt shortcuts are not going to be the same. So there's a slight learning curve there. And then you start getting into the meat, working with large data sets in SQL, or Squirrel, if you prefer. I don't pronounce it the other way. Anyway, but you're going to do a good quick lab here that is going to get you into BigQuery, which is the Google Cloud SQL platform. Very usable. The quick labs that use BigQuery, thankfully, don't go through the incognito mode and all that BS. That's super annoying. It's just, you just open another tab and start going. Can be a little sketchy. Sometimes you'll have to close it and reopen it. If you pause for a while, I will warn you, you're probably gonna have to shut it down and start over. But yeah, super easy using SQL and BigQuery, very, very intuitive. They give you great steps to go through it. And really that's your first time. Yeah, I just pronounced it squirrel. Iris, come on, you gotta get on Team Squirrel. Yeah, so the story behind that is Christina Stathopoulos used to say that as a joke. Like, if you want, you can call it squirrel. So I and Wilson Mann and somebody else, I think Abe might be on Team Squirrel now. But yeah, started pronouncing it squirrel and using the squirrel emoji every time we talk about SQL. There's no other pronunciation. I don't want to hear it initialized. Okay, so that's week 3, and that is kind of the blood and guts there of this course. Once you're through that, there's kind of some good stuff, but it's ancillary information. So you get into week 4, effectively organizing your data. You can already tell, hey, the heavy lifting is over. So, but this is all good stuff. It's a little dry. And so Hallie and the gang do a pretty good job of keeping it sort of light and lively and poking a bit of fun at the fact that they're talking about file naming conventions and file hierarchies, and it's just not, even for data geeks, it's just not a fun topic. So very short section. I don't think, are there any quick labs here? No. Okay, so really it's kind of mostly instructional. There's one learning log, which is just kind of express your thoughts about, yes, Iris, awesome. So anyway, easy one there. I did this reading, trust me, it's just a weird thing with going to the Google internal course. Okay, and then week 5, the optional week. So I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here because most of our viewers, they're with us on this, okay? The importance of becoming a part of the data community. This is important to me. It's been a key motivator and enabler in my whatever success I've experienced so far. It's a big reason I'm here today doing this, why I'm comfortable with it, how I met John David, how I got all these opportunities. It's just been, if there's a secret to my success, it's right here in this section. I would say if you're not already a master at what's out there for you in the data community online, go through this and pay attention. It's only an hour, they estimate, for the thing. There's a few videos and a couple of readings, but it's gonna get you, again, it's gonna have you get on Kaggle and just post a couple of things. There's a social media element to Kaggle, which is kind of neat. How to build connections on LinkedIn. You could just go back and watch my 2 appearances on how to get an analytics job to explain that to you. But if you want a shorter version, there's a 3-minute video here and a 10-minute reading on how to get that done. Yeah, so again, they make it optional. And okay, yeah, you could be a successful data analyst without this, but why would you take a tool out of your toolbox and say, no, I'm a hater, I don't like LinkedIn. I'm not going to talk to people. Somewhere in your data analyst career, you're going to have to talk to people. And just remember, we're data analysts. We're not data scientists. We have to be good at dealing with people, just like the man on Office Space says. So that is the end of lesson 3. I highly recommend you do it. It is necessary to continue along the process. There's definitely more technical building blocks in this lesson than there was in lessons 1 and 2. It's kind of a steady ramp up. Lesson 4 is where you're going to start really getting into tools. And so the ones that are chomping at the bit to get at the technical aspects, that's where it really gets hot and heavy.
Perfect. Well, I mean, this was awesome. So you feel, what would you rate it for out of a 5-star? Are you, what was it, 4.8? Are you on par, above, below?
The average is 4.8. I mean, it's discrete. So you can either go 4 or 5. I'd call it a 4. I think lessons 2 and 3 are both good, but there's could be better. I don't know the way they had to structure it with the requirements of Coursera, like we talked about last week. You've got to put a week's worth of or a month's worth of information in there, and that's what they did. So
awesome. Well, we're bumping up against you got a hard stop at 1. You got any closing thoughts?
An actual meeting, my internship.
Wow, yeah. A Google meeting. Wow,
a Google meeting. Yes. Sales data, good stuff.
So, any closing thoughts?
I would just say so. We're going some different directions with the Google Data Thoughts Challenge. I love the people that have been participating. It is not a heavily structured thing. Do I ever do a content initiative on LinkedIn that's like heavily structured or rules bound? I'm toying with the idea of putting up a Kenji-like scoreboard for the participants in the Google Data Thoughts Challenge, just to show who's engaging, who's writing, who's not. I'm not evaluating anybody's work, just saying like, hey, you responded to this post, you wrote a post on this one. I really appreciate I think we've got 60 subscribers to the hashtag, which is fantastic. We've had, I think, about 15 people write something, either a thought out response or a post of their own. And I just love the fact that I'm encouraging people to write about data, and it's not, it's more than just look at my code. It's here are my thoughts, which I think is a deeper challenge, especially for us technical types.
Awesome. Well, I think you put a pin in it. Thanks so much for doing all the work. Also, thank you so much for putting together the hashtag. 25% is huge. That's a really great response rate.
Oh, yeah.
So awesome. Everybody tuning in, thank you guys for asking all these great questions and comments. And we are going to be having a live premiere on Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Alex the Analyst. So it was me, Alex the Analyst, Albert, and Hunter. So if you want to see Alex critique one of my interns' LinkedIn portfolios and also one of their Tableau portfolio, or their LinkedIn profile and their Tableau public portfolio.
His mustache is getting kind of ridiculous. So have you noticed that?
The what?
He's running wild with that mustache. He's starting to look like right over down there. I don't know if he's feeling the Texas thing or what. But.
That's true. He was a North Carolina boy, just like me. Yeah. But we lost him to Texas. It seems to be the trend. All right. Well, I'll see you guys later. Have a good meeting out.
Thank you.
See ya.